From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hello everyone, welcome to OpenLine. Good show tonight. We always hear politicians say they want to be open and transparent. We hear people in government saying we want government to be open and transparent. But how open is Tennessee government? That's what we want to talk about tonight. It is certainly very important to the job that I do as a reporter, as an investigative reporter, but it's important to every citizen. How easy is it to hold accountable government agencies and government departments, and how open and accessible are public records? That's what we want to talk about tonight. We have with us the Executive Director of the Tennessee Coalition for Open Government, Deborah Fisher. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for being here. Now, so let's start broadly and then kind of move down. There were some new laws passed this last session. We'll get into some of those. But broadly speaking, generally speaking, is Tennessee a state where it is easy for the public to go in and get public records?
Well, it does depend a little bit where you live and what government you're requesting the records from, because some governments make it easier and they're more hospitable to a public records requester than other government entities. But in general, our public records laws in Tennessee are very strong, and they do provide access to records and in a very systematic way. And so there is a right to access records. We do sometimes hear from citizens or journalists who face roadblocks and have to work through some issues before the government entity will actually follow the law and provide them. But in general, the laws are pretty good in Tennessee.
Generally speaking, why is this so important? You know, for the average person out there, why is this so important to them? Right.
Well, we believe that in a democracy, you need an informed citizenry, and citizens need to know what their government is doing if they want to be able to participate effectively in their local government, in their state government, or federal government. It's also a way that citizens hold their own government accountable for what they're doing. If they don't have access to government documents or access to meetings of governing bodies where decisions are made, they really don't have a way to know independently what is going on. And really, if we lived in a state like that, we would only know what government officials wanted to say. So it's important. Government documents, there are a wide range of government documents, but they basically are a diary of what government does. It's the data, it's public policies, contracts, you know, so many things that you can get to understand an issue better.
And I think they're so important to get and try and kind of lay out a picture of what is actually going on. And when I ask you, how is Tennessee, how do we rank, you said, well, it depends on where you live, which is kind of an interesting answer, because obviously we're covered by state law. Do you think, all right, so in some of these more rural areas, they can be much more difficult to deal with. Do you think that when it is more difficult, people don't know, or people are willfully obstructing access to these records?
Well, when I've seen problems occur, and I should mention that there are a lot of government entities that do know the law and follow the law, and there is a state agency called the Office of Open Records Counsel that exists to answer questions from government entities about the law, and of course we exist and have a helpline. But when there are problems with getting access to records, it usually is around delaying access to records, and it's usually because someone either doesn't like the requester, what's in the record might be controversial, or they don't want it out in the public, or they don't want it out in the public yet. They want to control what the message is about something. And so that's usually where there are problems in accessing records.
And so one of the big ways that records, that I guess people are denied access often, is through fees. Agencies are allowed to charge fees, right?
They're allowed to charge fees in Tennessee when a requester wants copies. Our law contains a provision that says that any citizen can look at a public record, and the word that is used in the statute is inspect a public record without any cost. And that is a very important safety net in our law. So if you just want to go look at records, you can do that during the business hours of the government entity for free. But if you want copies, and most people do want copies, they don't want to sit in the government office and read them, there can be charges, like a per page charge, but the other charge that they can assess for copies is the labor, the amount of time it took to compile or redact copies. And that is where we have seen some problems around the state, where someone will request copies and the government entity comes back with, you know, $2,000 for copies of something. So that can be an issue.
Because they'll say, we had to give it to our lawyer, and our lawyer charges X number of dollars an hour to redact information that could be, you know, I guess that shouldn't be out in the public view. If there's social security numbers on there, that has to be redacted. Then there are all these other things that can be redacted. I mean, it has happened. You'll get a document that is heavily redacted. And that can be frustrating. But then they say, well, because the lawyer had to look at it, because it took time to find it, because they had to pull it, yeah, they'll charge a lot of money. And really, what does the law say? Doesn't it say charge reasonable? So it doesn't even give real direction on what it is. It
says the fees must be reasonable, and there is a schedule of reasonable fees that the Office of Open Records Counsel puts out that is a guideline that is supposed to be used by government entities. And it says the first hour of labor must be free, and there's a cap on a per page cost of 15 cents for black and white. But really where we don't have any caps are in the per hour charges. So sometimes we'll see labor costs at $50 an hour. It's whoever does it. We've had situations where someone was requesting records from a school district, and they said that the superintendent had to review everything. So then the requester was charged the superintendent's, what would be his hourly rate. He's on the salary, which was pretty high, to access those records. So that can be pretty frustrating for a requester who really wants copies. But there is that safety net in the law, and we actually, a couple years ago, there was an effort to remove that safety net for free inspection, and there was enough pushback that lawmakers recognized how important it was, and they kept it in there.
There was an effort to remove the free public inspection, and that failed. So let's say I asked to publicly inspect some documents, some contracts, let's say, and that's free. Then I say, well, I want to make a copy, and they say, well, that's going to be hundreds of dollars. Then I say, okay, I want to just take a picture with my phone of these documents. You know, you have them right here. I just want to take a picture. What happens then?
Well, it depends, again, which government entity you're requesting that from, but we have started to see some government entities refuse to allow you to take a picture with your phone. We think that's unreasonable. We actually don't think the law allows that, because it is unreasonable, and it doesn't have to do with the fragility of the document. It really has to do with they want to force you to be able to pay for copies, and that's the complaint that you'll hear. Well, if you're just going to avoid our copy fees by taking a picture of one of the pieces of paper, you know, that's not fair. So I think that is why this has emerged. But in some cities, there is no prohibition for taking photos. For example, the public records policy of Nashville expressly allows someone to take pictures of public records. But there are many that are starting to prohibit that, and I see that as a problem down the line, because so many people use their phones to take pictures of everything, especially younger people, you know, like, you know, whatever it is, I'm shopping for a chair, I'll take a picture. You know, they are just so used to taking notes with their camera that I think there's going to be a collision on this issue with government entities.
Let's go to the phones here. Let's go to Granger. Hello, Granger.
Yeah, hello.
Go right ahead, Granger.
Yeah, I have a question for you. You got me thinking about. Could you define a public record? And part of my concern is I think we should have good access to records, but I would not like my personal information from driver's license, from other kind of places where I have to register with the government exposed either as an individual or an aggregate of some group. So could you define that for me?
All right, good question. Thank you, Granger.
Yeah, that is a good question. And there are more than 400 exemptions to the Public Records Act, and really some of the most important exemptions have to do with private citizen information, like your driver's license number or anything that the government might have. They'll have your Social Security number. They may have some tax information. So there is a lot of that is confidential in public records. It must be redacted before it's released, and that we do see a lot of if you look through all the exemptions in the Public Records Act, you'll see all those things as exemptions. So, and it's a valid concern.
So I feel like he's concerned. He's concerned that someone could access that. How concerned should someone be? Let's say, I guess voter registration. That's public data, right? How much information could anyone get? Candidates request that all the time.
Yes.
How much information could you get of a person based on voter information?
Yes, and that's an interesting question because it recently came up because the Trump's panel that's looking at elections requested voter information from all the states, and some states complied and some states said we're not going to give it. But in Tennessee, essentially, voter registration information is public information. You can go to your county election commission and you can look at those documents, and you'll be able to see the name of the voter. You'll be able to see, you know, where they live, the age, and also which elections that they have voted in. You would not be able to see, of course, who they voted for. That is confidential.
You would not be able to
obviously.
see their Social Security number.
No, you would not be able to see the Social Security number, any kind of private information like that.
Or their phone number or something like that. But their address, that would be part of it.
That would be part of it.
Yeah.
And so that is. Now, there is some pushback on who has access if you were to get data on that, basically a generated list. And our law says that if you want to get a list of all the voters with all that information, that you have to pay for it, and you have to state that it is for a political purpose. And other states have laws like that. Essentially what they're trying to do is prevent commercial use of that information.
Right. All right, we have to take a break. If you want to call in, it's an interesting discussion. Call in with any question or comment. There's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.